So if you can settle down quickly. So we'll try and finish off by 3 p.m. today. We'll try as early as possible so that you can go back home by on time. Okay. So we'll start off aerosol therapy in critical care. Okay. So probably one of those topics where you will not have much of a discussion during your training period. Okay. I will restrict myself exactly to what you want to know in exams. Okay, I'll not go much into depths. By half an hour, I'll try to complete exactly what you will be asked in exams and what you must know before going to exams. Okay, so why do we require aerosol therapy? If at all a patient requires it, how will we do it, and when not to do it? Okay, so this will be the base of the talk. So why do we do it? We do it because we will be able to achieve a higher drug concentrations in the tissue in the lung level if you do a inhaled antibiotic or an aerosol, a bronchodilator, or any other drug for that matter. We try to achieve this higher concentration with a minimal effect on the systemic side effects. This does not mean that if you give a high dose nebulized colistin, you will not cause nephrotoxicity, or a high dose nebulized amikacin, you will not cause nephrotoxicity. It is very much possible. I'll say you why. Rapid clinical response, because you are trying and bypassing all your first pass metabolisms and you are delivering the drug right directly to the tissue. So you are expecting a rapid clinical response, better therapeutic efficacy, bypassing your first pass metabolisms, and which is lesser dose when compared to the systemic one, you are trying to achieve a superior benefit. For example, if you have oral salbutamol, you give it as in milligrams, but when you give a MDI salbutamol, it is in micrograms. Okay, so for a smaller dose, you try to achieve a better therapeutic efficacy. This is generally for respiratory diseases, but you must have used a lot of drugs which are not used for respiratory per se, but which has systemic effects given as an inhalational route. Okay, the reason behind that is lung has a large absorption space. Okay, the enormous absorptive surface area and a high permeable membrane. Okay, low enzymatic environment, which is again you are trying to bypass your liver, and reproducible absorption kinetics. There's a whole list of drugs which can be used through inhalation route. What we commonly use is your antibiotics, your aminoglycosides is the ones which were extensively studied, amphotericin, ceftazidime, colistin, gentamicin, ribavirin and vancomycin. These are the things which we generally use in critical care. Tobramycin is used in cystic fibrosis, so that is for a long-term therapy. Where do you use inhaled heparin? Have anybody used inhaled heparin? Wild guess? Inhaled heparin has been approved by FDA for use in inhalation burns. Okay. It is said that it reduces the effect on bronchus. Bronchodilators, steroids, mucolytics, hypertonic salines, and whole host of other drugs which are used. So what is an aerosol? It is a system which creates a suspension of liquid into or solid in a gaseous medium. So we generally try to generate droplets from a liquid medium or a solution. So the mechanism of particle deposition is based on impaction, sedimentation and Brownian motion. Brownian motion is just a random motion of molecules. Okay. So if a particle is large, it is likely to get impacted in the larger airways. By particle I mean droplets. Okay. If it is of a medium size, it will go to the secondary or tertiary bronchioles, and if you want a deposition in your alveoli, you need very small droplets which will go all the way to the alveoli. So totally how many divisions are there in the respiratory tract from trachea to alveoli? 20? Any other answer? So it varies, but it is between 23 and 27. Okay. So if you have a large particle, it will get impacted into your primary airway itself, trachea, left bronchus, right bronchus, maximum up to upper 10 divisions. The problem with this is, in the initial part of airway, your flow is extremely turbulent when compared to your distal airways. Okay. So if you have a very turbulent flow, your smaller particles will not get deposited here. They are washed away because of turbulent expiratory flow as well. This is the place we are trying to target, especially in our setups where your patient has ventilator associated tracheobronchitis. Okay. So in those patients we used inhaled antibiotics because we want an impaction here. You just put him on nebulized amikacin. You will have a high deposition at the primary airways, and you try to prevent this colonizer to go into your distal airways. Okay. There are enough studies where it has now studied that inhaled antibiotics for tracheobronchitis is slightly beneficial. More distally, the velocity of the air or gas which enters is reduced, and if you go even more distally, now you have almost a laminar flow kind of thing. That is why we have a diffusion Brownian motion here, which is random movement of particles, and it gets deposited in the alveoli. Okay, to the particle to reach here, the particle size should be at least 2 to 5 microns. That's as small as you need it. If you have any particle which is less than this, moment the alveoli collapses or closes during expiration, that particle is washed off again. So too smaller particle is not going to do any good to the patient. Okay, it is lost back in expiration. So the ideal target which we try to achieve is 2 to 5 micron size if you want to achieve tissue deposition in the alveoli. But if you are just targeting bronchial asthma where you are going to use bronchodilators, we do not want your droplets to go there. We want your droplets to remain here. Okay, in that sense you do not require particles which are very less. Okay, we will see the size and correlation. There are various factors which will affect the delivery of your drug to the tissue. So you have a patient, you have a ventilator, you have a drug delivery system which is your nebulizer, and you have the drug per se. So all this will some way affect the amount of drug which is going to get deposited in your tissues. So ventilator related, what mode you are using, what is the tidal volume rate, what is your inspiratory cycle, what is the waveform, what type of nebulizer or pressurized MDI you are using, what is the drug, whether it is a suspension or a solution, what type of flow you are using, whether the patient has any airway obstruction, whether there is heterogeneity in lungs. All this will affect the amount of drug which is going to get deposited in the tissues. We'll look into it one by one. First is the patient related factors. The first patient related factor is diseased airway itself. Okay, whenever a patient is a smoker or a COPD or something, he has a lot of mucus retention and there is impaired mucociliary clearance. So the drug which is getting impacted in the primary trachea or proximal airways, because of impaired clearance, it is not going propelled forward anywhere. It just stays there. Okay, and if there is extensive mucus retention, the drug now has to penetrate through the mucus and then enter into the tissues. Okay, so amikacin per se, not only amikacin, all your aminoglycosides has extremely poor transmucous delivery. Okay, so if you have a patient with acute exacerbation of COPD, then you will have to use a concentration of drug which is much more larger than you will use in a patient who is airway is more or less okay. Okay, regional aeration. As we are all sitting, we all know that the aeration is better in the upper part of the lungs when compared to your bases. Most of our patients are ventilated, so they are supine, but the deposition is not homogeneous. Okay, it is heterogeneous in the sense some part of lung which is diseased or atelectatic is not getting aerated same way as in ARDS, and the other part of lung which is getting aerated well, the deposition of drug in that particular part of the lung is going to be fine, which means that the drug should not work in ARDS. If you have a patient with severe ARDS, VAP going into ARDS, hardly 10% of his lung is normal, the drug should not work. If you go by this, that in the heterogeneous deposition, it will be better in a place where the lung is aerated well, which means that dense consolidated lung, your drug is not going to get deposited. The deposition might be less. So this part has been extensively studied, and if you see this is on piglets on E. coli. E. coli was injected, VAP was created, okay, and the route of antibiotic administration. If you give an intravenous antibiotic to that patient, look at the amount of, this is focal pneumonia, this is severe pneumonia, okay. In focal pneumonia, you can see the amount of drug which is getting delivered is extremely high because most of your lung is extremely aerated well. Only a small part of lung is diseased. But if you have a severe pneumonia, look at the amount of drug which is getting deposited. It's proportionately low. But we still use it because the concentration is still multifold when compared to your intravenous antibiotics. Okay, so even though the deposition of the drug is extremely low in a diseased lung, the amount of concentration which you will achieve at the tissue is multifold when compared to giving intravenous drug alone. Okay, that is why we still use it. So this, as I already said, if you have a very large particle, you are likely to get deposited in the upper airway. To reach to a distal lung compartment, you need a size of 2 to 5 microns. If it is very less, you will get washed away with your expiratory gases. There is yet another patient-related factor which I will be discussing in the later part of my talk. Next is the delivery mechanism. What type of nebulizer are you using? Okay, what type of nebulizer are you using most of the times? Anybody using jet nebulizers nowadays? Okay. Ultrasonic nebulizers? Anybody using vibrating mesh? No? One. Okay. So I will tell you, if a patient is affordable, after this talk you should not use anything other than vibrating mesh nebulizers. So jet nebulizers, it requires an air compressor or a pressurized gas supply. Okay. Jet nebulizers is your normal nebulizer. Okay, it requires, you cannot nebulize either with you need at least 6 to 8 liters of gas flow, or you need a compressed gas coming from the compressor. Okay, so which acts as a driving force. This compressed gas is passed through a small orifice here. You are trying to create a Venturi effect. Okay, so compressed gas is delivered as a jet through a small orifice, generating a region of negative pressure and pulling in your gas stream by Venturi effect. The then film breaks into droplets due to surface tension forces. Ultrasonic nebulizers, it needs a power unit. It can have a fan or it need not have a fan. Okay, the fan is just to propel the droplets, but if a patient is on ventilator, the propel can be done by your inspiratory flow. The power unit converts this electrical energy to high frequency ultrasonic waves. This wave is transmitted to the solution. That's the energy which is transmitted to the solution generates aerosols. Okay, the fan is used to deliver the aerosol to the patient, or aerosol is evacuated from the nebulizer by inspiratory flow of the patient. So nowadays you should use vibrating mesh nebulizers. The reason behind this, we'll come to it. This is a mesh plate which has lot of apertures. Okay, the AeroNeb nebulizer which is available in Medanta has around 1000 apertures. Okay, so vibrating mesh plate, it keeps on vibrating with multiple apertures to generate aerosol. The advantage is it does not require electrical source. It can be operated by a battery itself. So if you use a jet nebulizer, you will get a good droplet size. Okay, there are two types of jet nebulizers. One is breath enhanced and one is breath actuated. Breath actuated is moment the patient starts inspiratory flow, the nebulizer starts working. It is very cheap, hardly 50 rupees, easy to use, effective in delivering drugs. It is better than using PMDI with spacers. It is highly inefficient in delivering your antibiotics distal where you want it. You will have to clean it every time, and it either needs a compressed gas or an additional tubing. Ultrasonic nebulizers are much better when compared to jet nebulizers, but the problem is they make a lot of noise. Yet another issue with jet nebulizers is if you put a volume of 3 ml, okay, at least 1 ml will be there in the last where your fume generation becomes less. You must have noticed in all your patients. Okay, so that's the amount of residual volume which will remain in your jet nebulizers. So if you are delivering a colistin antibiotic, 3 million units colistin will cost the patient 6,000-7,000 rupees, and 1 ml of that is lost in the nebulizer itself. And you do it every time, that's the amount of drug loss which is going to happen in jet nebulizers. Same residual volume is there with ultrasonic nebulizers as well. There's a large residual volume in ultrasonic nebulizers. It creates a lot of noise. Okay. The other problem is the amount of electrical energy and the ultrasonic waves it produces. It creates a lot of high temperature for the solution. So if you are using a protein, for example, if you are using inhaled insulin, okay, the insulin will break down into peptides and the peptides will denaturate because of the heat which is generated. So ultrasonic nebulizers is not a gold standard that if you have ultrasonic nebulizer I can use drugs across the spectrum. You cannot use a lot of protein products or a peptide mediated products in ultrasonic nebulizing, and if an antibiotic solution is also there, if you are generating too much heat, there are reports that you might denaturate the antibiotic solution and it may not be that effective when compared to a vibrating mesh. So vibrating mesh is the way forward. Okay. Silent, short duration time, almost zero residual volume. Whatever you put in the nebulizer, everything will go to the patient. Optimized particle size, more efficient. The drug which is going to get deposited when compared to jet nebulizers is 3 times higher, and this has been proved in studies. Okay. The temperature of the aerosol is not changed, which means you can put any solution into an AeroNeb. AeroNeb is the brand name. So vibrating mesh nebulizer, and the efficiency of that will be at least 2 to 3 times higher when compared to a jet nebulizer and an ultrasonic nebulizer. Okay. Its cost is extremely high. Okay, it is just this much and it costs around 9,000 rupees. So if a patient is affordable, please do not use anything else. If you are wasting 3 ml of colistin per day, that is 9,000 rupees. So droplet size decreases with flow. This is jet, this is ultrasonic, this is AeroNeb. Your residual volume maintains here. This largely depends upon patient's inspiratory flow, or you need a compressed gas. The problem here is the residual volume and the temperature. There is no problem here. The one last thing which can be used as a drug delivery system is your pressurized MDIs. Okay, we have used it. All you do is a patient has a large bronchospasm, या salbutamol का puff लेके आओ, ventilator disconnect किया, you keep pushing the puff. Does that work? That does not work. Okay, you need a special catheter for that to put it into the trachea. So they are small, portable, convenient. That's why we are using it. There's a propellant here which is under pressure. It contains a propellant. It contains the solution as well to deliver a metered dose aerosol through a hole. There's a canister propellant, drug formation, metering well actuator. Previously they were all based on chlorofluorocarbons, the propellant. Now in US per se, they have moved away from this because of toxicities and moved away to hydrofluoroalkane. The problem with this is, per se you cannot use it in a ventilator patient. If you disconnect the patient, put on ventilator and give salbutamol nebulization, it's not going to work. So you need spacers or adapters which can be used along with the ventilator circuit in line. Okay, so there are basically 3 types of these: unidirectional, bidirectional, based on which direction, whether the flow is going to be on one direction or 2 directions, and the chamber volume varies from 50 to 150 ml. So this diagram you can see in Tombin's 3rd edition. There are multiple market variants of a spacer which is used so that this part can be attached. So you can see the connectors here. Okay, so this can come within the ventilator circuit. The problem with PMDIs is when you compare along with the other 3 nebulizers, the efficacy is very, very poor across all parameters. Okay, portability, yes. Aerosol temperature, it is not affected with mesh nebulizers. It is highly affected in ultrasonic nebulizers. Jet and ultrasonic both has a lot of residual volume, so a lot of drug is lost. Drug deposition is not high. The emitted dose is high, but the deposited dose is not high in these two. It is almost whatever you goes to the patient in mesh. The treatment time, because the emitted dose is low, because there is a lot of residual volume, you will have to do a long treatment time. Subsequently, I will tell you that if you have a jet nebulizer and if it is on for 15 minutes, your ARDS patient will become hypoxemic. It is very short here. Okay, it doesn't have to be disconnected at all, but the device cost is extremely high. As I said, it's roughly around 9,000 bucks. So now we have decided that you are going to put a vibrating mesh nebulizer, but where do you want to put it? Which part of your circuit? anybody wants to, so there are three positions, okay. Position 1 is at your eyepiece. Position 2 is your 10 to 15 centimeter before that, and position 3 is just near the ventilator. Which anybody wants to put in the expiratory limb? No hands? Fine. And which position should be preferred? How many says 1? Okay. How many says 2? Okay. How many says 3? Nobody for 3? Okay. So let's see. Definitely inspiratory limb or at the wide. Do not put it in the expiratory limb. So if this is your wide, okay, and this is a nebulizer here which is very close to the wide. Okay. If you have a nebulizer which is actuated by inhalatory flow, which means it's not delivering the drug continuously. It is delivering only when there is an inspiratory flow. It is not delivering when expiration. But most of your nebulizers are continuous flow. Okay, so now there's a continuous flow. You are giving a drug, the patient is expiring. All this drug is lost in expiratory limb. If it is too close to your eyepiece, okay, which means that if you put it near eyepiece, the entire drug is lost. If you put it 15 to 40 centimeter from the eyepiece, when your patient is expiring, your drug is continuously coming here. But this gas moves out, this is propelled forward. Okay, with the next inspiratory flow, the entire drug is given as a bolus. Okay, so the amount of drug which is going to get deposited, it will be better if you use it at this. Please do not use it at eyepiece. No nebulizer works at eyepiece. Mark my words, for all practical reasons. Theoretically, yes, you can. There are certain situations where you can use. For all practical purpose and for exams, do not connect at eyepiece. As one word answer, if you want to say, it should be in the inspiratory limb, 15 centimeter from the eyepiece. There are certain situations, if you are using a jet nebulizer, where would you like your jet nebulizer to be? At the eyepiece or more distal towards the ventilator? Will come. So this is again, this is not antibiotic dosing. This study was done on albuterol. So what they did was they were using jet, ultrasonic, mesh, and PMDIs, and they were seeing how much was the drug getting deposited in tissues. So first is jet, eyepiece, position 3, which is near the ventilator. Okay. So if you are using a jet nebulizer, it should always be as close to the ventilator as possible, because the amount of reservoir it requires to require a high dose of drug to be delivered to the patient is high. Okay, so more the reservoir, more the drug will go into the patient in the next inspiratory flow. Okay, if you are using a mesh nebulizer, position 2 is better. Same for ultrasonic nebulizer, but if you use a PMDI, it really does not matter. 1 and 2 does not make any difference. So put it in the inspiratory limb. If you are using a jet nebulizer, please be as close to the ventilator circuit as possible. Otherwise, you are losing a lot of drug. If you are using ultrasonic or mesh, it should be in the inspiratory limb 15 centimeters away from the Y junction. There are certain studies where they have placed the mesh nebulizer, especially when you are using a heated humidifier, between the humidifier and the ventilator, which means you are as close to the ventilator as possible. There's no problem using this, but make sure that when you are nebulizing, switch off your heated humidifier. Otherwise, the entire idea of using a vibrating mesh nebulizer over ultrasonic nebulizer is lost if you are heating your drug. PMDIs, please do not use it. Most important thing, please remove your HMEs. If you have a HME connected at your eyepiece when you are nebulizing a patient, zero drug is deposited in the tissues. There's almost no drug which will cross the HME and go to the patient. Okay, so you remove the HME, and where will you put it? There's something which you will have to save on the ventilator as well. Expiratory limb. Okay, otherwise what will happen? Yes, your expiratory flow sensor will get clogged because of the drug. The patient will have extremely high peak pressures. The nurse will call you. आप बोलेंगे तुम लोगों ने suction नहीं किया है. The patient is already becoming hypoxic, not getting anything, and she will disconnect the ventilator and do a suction, and the patient will have cardiac arrest. This has been reported. There's a case reports on all this. Okay, so you have used the mesh nebulizer. You have put it at 15 centimeter away from your Y-piece, but still there might be some factors. So there will be some difference between the drug which has been deposited and the drug which is going to get delivered on the tissues. What are those factors? The nebulized dose is not going to remain on inhaled dose. Some amount of drug is going to get lost in your EE tubes, trachea. Then some bronchial pluggings is going to be there. Most of your patients are not normal patients. So some gets deposited in the bronchioles, some gets deposited in the alveoli. And if the tissue is inflamed, which means there's more blood flow there. They are leaky, endothelium is leaking. So that drug is not getting deposited in the tissues. It's lost into the systemic circulation. That is why I said in the beginning, just giving inhaled antibiotics does not mean your patient will not have antibiotic related toxicities. Okay, because the amount of drug which you are going to use in antibiotics, in inhaled antibiotics, is extremely high. You will use 80 milligram of amikacin. Okay, if you have a leaky endothelium, almost entire 80 milligram can go into your systemic circulation and still cause nephrotoxicity. Okay, so there's some amount of Exwell dose, then we'll come to the circuits. So if you use a PMDI, it has to be synced with your inspiratory flow, because if you, for example, if you are ventilating a patient with ARDS, how many of you are ventilating with a rate of 30 to 35? Good numbers, okay, which means your inspiratory time is a second or something, if you are 1:2 ratio, okay, and it's less than a second. And if you have a time lag of your inspiratory flow, if you have activated your PMDI and your inspiratory flow is 1 second late, no drug is given to the patient, because it is purely dependent upon inspiratory flow. So it is to be synced with the inspiratory flow. Okay. Moreover, please do not ventilate your patients with the rate of 30. It's not recommended anymore. Just read for exam and forget it. Do not practice on exams. So what mode of ventilation you want? I have given the answer. Why not spontaneous mode of ventilation? I have said it is control mode. Does that mean that if the patient is on spontaneous mode, I will not give nebulized antibiotics? Okay. As I said in the beginning, you need a laminar flow for a better delivery of drug. If you have a turbulent flow, if a patient is breathing spontaneously and if it is generating a lot of inspiratory flow, which means it is going to remain turbulent. Unless it is completely synced and the patient is now weanable from the ventilator where it's completely comfortable, that's a different story. Okay, so whenever you're putting a patient on inhaled antibiotics per se, it should always be controlled. What should be your inspiratory time? More than expiration, less than expiration? Your drug is based on your inspiratory flow. Okay, so longer the inspiration, better will be your drug deposition in the tissues. Again, coming to ARDS, if you have a patient, you are ventilating at a rate of 30 with a 0.6 or 0.7 of your inspiratory time, you are not depositing any drug to the patient in the tissues. Okay, so the recommended inspiratory time is 1:1 at least. If a patient has a CO2 of 70 and if you are using jet nebulizer, please God save that patient. What should be your flow pattern? Which means, do you want a decelerating flow pattern or a constant flow pattern? Yes, decelerating flow pattern causes a turbulent flow at the beginning. Okay, so we do not want turbulent flow. So if you remember that we do not want turbulent flow, most of your ventilator settings will fall in place. So what's recommended is constant inspiratory flow, tidal volume of 6 mils per kg, respiratory rate of 12 beats per minute. So as in again and again, patients in whom we are going to use nebulized antibiotics, you are not going to ventilate these patients at the respiratory rate of 12. You are not going to keep a E ratio of 1:1. So please be careful. If you want an effective drug delivery, these settings has to be maintained. Otherwise, there's no point in using inhaled antibiotics. So just last 3-4 slides. I said the patient-related factors. One is lung aeration. In the beginning, I said if you have atelectatic lung, the amount of drug which is going to get deposited in that lung purely by inhalation route is going to be extremely low. Okay? So do we give PEEP or we don't give PEEP? Which will be better? Hey, kuch to bolo. We definitely PEEP. You try to open the lungs before giving your drugs. So look at this. This is amikacin here. I am not sure if last people can see. This is intravenous group. This is purely nebulization group. Okay. This is the lung aeration. If the lung aeration goes up from 0 to 50%. Okay. Same way. In the nebulization group, as the lung aeration improves, your drug deposition improves significantly. But what happens with the intravenous antibiotic? Most of you will be giving IV antibiotics before starting on inhalation antibiotics. Okay. As I said in the beginning, even in the middle of the class, high leaky endothelium, if you give an intravenous antibiotics, there is more deposition in the tissues. Leaky endothelium, if you give an inhaled antibiotic, more systemic toxicity. So the lung, as it gets aerated, the amount of drug which is deposited in the tissues has come down significantly. So do we give, what do we give here? You give intravenous or you give nebulized? Just look at the diagram carefully, you will find the answer there. Hurry up, sir is waiting, I have to finish off. Look at the drug concentrations here, 0, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 16. There's 0, 100, 200, 300, 400. Okay. So irrespective of what you do, you can give 10 times of your amikacin dosing, you will never achieve the same tissue concentration as you achieve in inhaled antibiotic. That is why we continue with inhaled antibiotics. So severe lung infection, increase alveolar capillary permeability, increase deposition of IV antibiotic. There is mucus plugging, atelectatic lung, impaired tissue deposition. By PEEP and nebulization prior with a bronchodilator improves your tissue deposition. Okay. So always at least 15 minutes prior to your nebulized antibiotic, the patient has to be bronchodilated. Do not switch off the PEEP. Okay. So you want to give a patient develops VAP today, you want to give inhaled antibiotic today, or you want to wait for 3 more days? We have been practicing, we have been giving inhaled antibiotics. When do you want to give? Today or 3 days later? Okay, so this will answer your questions. So if you have a patient, this is intravenous group. So if the patient has a focal bronchopneumonia and progressively worsening into confluent or purulent bronchopneumonia, the amount of drug is same. But look at for the nebulization group. When the patient had focal bronchopneumonia, I showed a diagram previously also. If it is a focalized pneumonia, your drug delivery is extremely good. As the pneumonia worsens, it becomes more heterogeneous, your drug delivery will go down. So if you want to use inhaled antibiotics, better use it early. Using late might not help the patient. So always combine with IV antibiotics. So ideally, what they say is you should calculate the extrapulmonary deposition, which literally means that you will have to remove a ventilatory circuit every day, wash it out, and with the wash you see how much is the drug concentration in that solution which are used for washing, because a lot of drugs is lost in your circuits, which is not done at all, it's not possible. So if you are using it as inhalation route alone, it should be the dose of IV route plus extrapulmonary deposition. Okay, so if you are using nebulized colistin, exclusively inhaled nebulized colistin, 9 million जो per day आप IV दोगे, plus whatever is lost here. So if you are using neb colistin alone, please do not give anything less than 9 millions. That is why the dosing of colistin is 3 million units 8 hourly. But if you are using it along with IV antibiotics, 1 million and 3 million will not make a difference, provided you are using a vibrating mesh at the position which I have said. Aminoglycosides once daily dosing, colistin, we all know that. Okay. So all your antibiotics are not wonder drugs. They have a lot of side effects. Please bronchodilate your patient before that. Obstruction of expiratory filter caused by repetitive aerosols of cephalosporins have been reported in ventilated patients with the risk of increased airway pressure and cardiac arrest. Okay. So if your staff calls you up and says कि patients का peak pressure बढ़ रहा है, please do not ask her to do suction. Please go and have a look if your expiratory flow sensor is getting clogged with your aerosols or not. So just summarize. Use nebulizers with small residual volume, which means please do not use jet nebulizers. Do not operate jet nebulizers with gas external to the ventilator. Position the nebulizer upstream in the inspiratory limb 15 to 40 cm of your Y-piece. Remove the HME during nebulization, and after nebulization, please do not forget to reconnect it, otherwise you are giving dry air. Constant flow ventilation with a low respiratory rate, low inspiratory flow and long inspiratory time. Place a new filter between the expiratory limb and the ventilator for each nebulization. Please monitor patients closely. If your expiratory filter is getting clogged, the patient might have cardiac arrest. And please re-humidify the patient because you have disconnected the HME before connecting your aerosol therapy. If you do not reconnect your HME, you are giving dry air to the patient. Thank you.